Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello and welcome to the 14th module in the series Marketing Management with a VUCA perspective. We are discussing fundamentals and I am your friend and guide, Siddhiprad Bhattacharya. On this journey, we have understood a lot about how business to business interactions happen, how marketing takes place in these environments, and how it is all about working together towards a synergy. In the words of the famous industrialist Henry Ford, who was the progenitor of Ford Motors, coming together is a beginning, keeping it together is progress, but working together is success. So this is precisely where business to business arrangements, their relationships, and all the factors that make it work and achieve success is something which we must always work towards and constantly think of as marketers. So in today's conversation, we are going to delve deeper into the business to business transactional and relationships aspects. Why it is important to internalize these is because most of marketing understanding stands around the consumer. But typically when it comes to the consumer, we talk about people who are at the ground level, the grassroots, the normal man on the street. B2B is a fairly unread and fairly less understood subject. So one must delve into it because it has larger volumes, it has larger impact on the economy, and that must be also very, very well understood. And we must harp on all these factors given the fact that the international factors that come into play, all the VUCA market forces that act upon economies, businesses and nations, they affect a large amount of business output, and that is precisely why business to business impact needs to be understood, and how to keep yourself resilient in the face of all incoming VUCA onslaught is something any marketer needs to know. The knowledge has to be internalized, and thereafter you have to ingrain it within your entire process of organizational purchasing. So ensuring that your organizational purchasing is well understood, and what we'll do is we'll do a recap and we'll look at global cases on it, so that we understand how businesses have actually done it on their personal ground level actions. So we'll go through these understandings and hopefully we will be able to internalize the learnings from them. So today, first what we'll do is we'll get into the core concepts, we'll recap those. So organizational buying refers to the decision making process by which businesses and institutions procure goods and services to meet organizational needs. Unlike consumer markets, organizational buying involves multiple decision makers. We've already talked about the layers through which decision making goes. There are initiators of the buys, there are people who are actual users, there are people who are the negotiators and purchasers, and then obviously people who are from the supply side of things. So there are definitely larger volume, larger value led decisions made, and so therefore the purchase cycles are also longer and the evaluation is far more complex. Factors such as price, quality, supplier reliability and long term partnerships, whatever your past experience has been, these all factors heavily influence the decision making. Also additionally, buying is often structured around formal tenders because it has to be process driven. There are contracts which are binding and legal, and then obviously there are price negotiations. Organizations prioritize the efficiency of the entire project or program which they are getting into. They look at cost effectiveness and how their entire organization's strategic objectives are aligned with whatever they are getting into in terms of an activity. The trust, the credibility and the supplier's ability to adapt to changing requirements also plays a very, very pivotal role in the entire process going in their favor or otherwise. Governments and institutional markets are also different kinds of buyers, and they further complicate these processes with their own individual strict guidelines, and governments specifically also have regulations. So, overall understanding all these nuances of organizational buying is very, very essential to suppliers who want to establish and maintain a competitive value driven relationship in their B market scenario. With that in mind, let us look at the organizational buying aspects all over again, so that we internalize these. So, by definition and market characteristics, organizational buying involves identifying, evaluating and selecting products and services for operational use. This is from the buyer's perspective. Business markets acquire goods for production and distribution. They bring in those input goods, using them they create whatever their organization's output is, and that is how business to business value is added. The characteristics here are there are fewer and definitely larger buyers than your individual man on the street. There are closer relationships because dependencies build over time, and typically they are geographically concentrated for economies, because the less you have to move from one place to the other, the cost is lowered, the speed and the alacrity with which you can demand and immediately be supplied with your raw materials or input materials instantly comes down, helping the organization to cut on costs. Again, it is demand which is derived from this, and it fluctuates with cycles because purchases from the end product may have their own cyclicity, seasonality and such like. Hence, they will also inspire the previous leg of demand automatically, and this price at times is inelastic, mostly is. Why? Because you will need those input items to create whatever that organization's output is. If you need to make cars, you will need steel, you will need plastic, you will need fiber, you will need rubber, you will need semiconductors and such like. And for an X number of products which you churn out, your demand price will be pretty much the same. The more you build in terms of volume, you will get a marginal reduction because of volume sales. Beyond that, the price really is quite inelastic. Again, in the organization, there is a process where you've got a decision making and buying center. The buying center has initiators like we spoke of, users, the people who will finally use it, influencers because people who input their analytics and their understanding of what is happening in the market and how to improve their process. These people influence the decision. There are senior brass who decide. There are approvers, top management who finally sign off, and then there are the buyers, the gatekeepers. These people allow a certain kind of supplier to come in. They allow for a certain price band to be managed. They allow for a certain relationship to be built. So, all of these things are part of the buying center dynamics. Marketers will also address environmental, organizational and interpersonal factors. Why each is important? Environmentally speaking, you have a lot many more costs being added as the world progresses towards a carbon neutral or carbon negative world. People are moving towards a point where they are becoming carbon negative because they should not be consuming more carbon based products and releasing the output of it into the environment around them. So, that is typically where the environmental clauses come into play. Organizationally speaking, marketers must understand that there are people who are within the hierarchy and who will influence the decisions, and then obviously there are individual people. So, interpersonal factors also come into play. Buyers have a certain focus and a certain process. The target effort on companies and key roles in buying centers, it has stages. So, problem recognition is where you first decide where is it that you are actually finding some challenge. Then you describe that in terms of a need. Then you have suppliers who are identified for that process. You search what you are going to get in terms of the supply, what the prices are, what the capabilities would be, etc. Then from this set you select, and when you select you work with them. Over time you keep reviewing their work so that you ensure that they are up to scratch, they have not dropped their standards, and your business is benefiting with the value that they bring on the table, and which is why you emphasize value at every stage. Now, there are various actors and relationships that get built amongst these actors in the entire transactions. So, there are tools and relationship building. So, use technology. you use branding, you use system selling, and they also create added services. Technology helps you streamline and put time and efficiency into play. Branding gives you the trust factor, gives you also the benefit that this particular supplier has worked with similar other organizations. They have the experience and the capability. They also have the muscle to get things done when demand suddenly surges. Systems based selling allows people to create successful practices and replicate them, making them faster and better and more improved over time. And when you add more services, you are actually adding value at each point in time, because what you are doing is you are trying to figure out what the buyer's problems are, and with those problems you walk into the scenario, you take that problem, break it down, solve them, and therefore you add more value rather than just giving them the product or service that you are offering. And when you build trust, you build it through competence, integrity, honesty, and being kind to people, which is where the entire added service aspect really comes from. You are kind enough to go and see what their problems are, and you start solving them. You solve their problems, it adds to the trust that they have on you and automatically increases your worth and your shelf life of business with that particular organization. Institutionally, governments have lots of schools, hospitals, prisons, and the list keeps going on. And here buyers prioritize typically cost effectiveness. They have a lot of paperwork you must go through, and then there are domestic preferences because they prefer that their economy should also benefit from it. And suppliers must adapt to strict procedures and an open bidding system. We have our GEM system in India. So similar processes are followed in most countries, most developed or developing countries which have that technological backbone. They operate on these lines. Now let's take the case studies which will help us understand how different brands have been able to manage their business in the past. One such case study is Alibaba. Now Alibaba was founded in 1999 by Jack Ma. You obviously have heard of them. The Chinese, he was at one point in time one of the most rich people on the planet, and his ambition was to connect Chinese suppliers with global buyers, because he could see the connect. China had become the factory of the world. So suppliers from China were providing products to a variety of buyers from across the globe, and these could be low tech, mid tech, high tech, whichever way you wanted to cut the pie. And with this he aimed to help the small manufacturers and entrepreneurs, because the larger companies had more established functions, processes and relationships as well. The smaller fry in that entire bargain would also improve their systems and processes, because somebody gave them that necessary aggregation backbone. So that aggregation backbone is what Alibaba sought to become through Jack Ma's vision. And they wanted to overcome all the regulatory hurdles, because they would take that entire strain on themselves, cross the regulatory hurdle, become that one checkpoint from which people can access even the smallest of players. Now this solved the challenge of enabling overseas buyers especially to access Chinese manufacturing, because here was a storefront which was online, and from where the entire world could access whatever was being offered by the Chinese factory market. And this grew into a global powerhouse because of the diverse businesses in which it got into, and it had e-commerce, technology and even entertainment as output verticals. So with this entire expanse working in Alibaba's favor, they soon grew to a lot of wealth and size in the entire business scenario. Now Alibaba.com was the primary. This was the original B2B platform and connected global buyers with the Chinese manufacturers, and this focused on bulk transactions across sectors like machinery, electronics, apparel and much more. Now there was also Taobao.com, which was a customer to customer marketplace, very similar to eBay. So this was very empirical, very individualistic, very slotted, one person kind of meeting one other person, that kind of an environment. And here there were chances for auctions and individual product sales, where mano y mano you used to interact and get whatever you needed. Then there was Tmall.com. This was a business to consumer site offering products from local and international brands, but this was inward looking. So this had Chinese consumers in mind. So like the highway which was going outside through the Alibabas and Taobaos of the world, the Tmall was a window to the world at large for Chinese consumers. Obviously, economic growth was pushing the capacity to purchase within China, and so people were more affluent and they wanted the kind of brands that were on offer internationally. So hence, Tmall became that particular interface through which they could access all these international brands. And this focused on high quality and branded goods. Obviously, the Gucci's, the Louis Vuittons of the world, all these brands were in high demand inside of China because people had money to spend. They wanted the best for their buck. So which is why this was the answer that they got. And then there was AliExpress. Now AliExpress again was a B2C platform catering to international buyers with no minimum order requirements, because at times people ask for samples, people ask for small minimum order quantities, people ask for 1 piece, 2 piece, 5 piece orders as well. So this removed the bulk operation cost from smaller buyers internationally, but they could also access the Chinese market and the Chinese manufacturers. And this offered competitive pricing similar to Alibaba.com because they had already built the entire foreground to getting something like AliExpress coming on top and serving the international buyers as well. The main infrastructure, logistics, etc., the heavy lifting had already been done. So Alibaba did the most of the heavy lifting, and AliExpress literally rode on the established platform which was there. Very similar to how FedEx also has variety of delivery patterns, from cargo to express to a very personal courier format, which is what Alibaba also did, but at a much grander scale, because obviously China is a huge market and the entire world at that point in time was looking at China as a world factory. Now, what was the business model? It was operating as an intermediary or an, like we spoke of, aggregator. It wasn't manufacturing much. It was just becoming the interface, the window, the storefront through which the inventory from the seller would go to the buyer. And it had various revenue streams. So it had commission, which it got from transactions. It had online advertisements for product visibility. Obviously, you was trying to sell on Alibaba. You want to attract more and more people there. So inventory is there, put up your ad, people see you, they buy from you. So that was the kind of revenue stream again for Alibaba. Again, there were certain premium seller features. So you could actually create your own storefront, a store within a store. Like how when you walk into a departmental store inside of a mall, you have got multiple brand outlets, but inside of, let's say, Shoppers Stop, you are getting a certain segment which keeps a certain line of watches which are fossil. Then you've got a certain line of perfumes which are Tata Skin, and you've got a certain line of clothing. So you will look at that particular brand of clothing only within the Shoppers Stop environment, but you will get to experience that particular brand within the larger departmental store. So each has its own little niche or a nook and cranny carved into the larger mall interface. That is precisely what the storefront customization was also offered to premium sellers. Obviously, you have to pay more for that. So they focused on products that are mass produced so that they are cost efficient and quickly can be turned on because there is available inventory. So they will never run into a situation where people are demanding a certain product, but it is not available. The factory already has enough and more which they can supply instantly. The other part was that they wanted to be lightweight so that they reduced their shipping costs. So they wanted to go in terms of apparel, electronics and such other products which were easier to ship, smaller to pack, and you could carry a large number of these across at the same point in time with one consignment. So what typically would happen is when you would ship a large consignment, every individual product sold would bring in incremental revenue. Whereas if you sell one large piece, you are taking away the space of a variety of other things which you could have placed in that particular lot. So that helped them reduce their shipping costs as well. So this is great planning in terms of economics of scale as well as logistical thinking. Now, when they were adapting to the consumer trends, they created something as basic as fidget spinners. So they used fidget spinners as one great particular item they were selling, and they were also selling e-cigarettes at a point in time. So whatever was in high demand, they would track it, and because of that particular tracking mechanism, they knew exactly which was spiking as a product, and they put out more, they advertised it more, they ensured the visibility of brands which were peddling those products got to be seen by audiences, and again they had audience information. So they could actually place disposition based. That is, when you say disposition, what does disposition mean? Disposition is basically, I want something. I am disposed to get something. So my mind is already working in that direction. So with that disposition, if I am searching for something and you suddenly walk in front of me, say, hey, you were looking for this, I have got it. So the chances of the sale, the transaction happening are definitely higher. So that disposition worked in Alibaba's favor because they were tracking their consumers' purchase habits and their seller and buyer disposition. Again, what benefits did they give? Chinese sellers value cost efficiency. They always want to ensure that they are spending less to produce and gaining the maximum value, the maximum profit out of the entire exercise. This is something which Jack Ma's entire enterprise was aimed, and it sort of delivered also to a fair extent. And this were basic services, because even the hygiene, if you provide it right and you provide it on time and you provide it without fail, where people do not doubt that this particular system can crash, then places like Alibaba will attract users because they are free. You can easily attract users here. So all of these things were working in Alibaba's favor. Now sellers, once they tasted blood there, they could upgrade, because if they want more value from that same system, they could upgrade to the premium features. So it was an upsell at every point in time because they wanted to derive more value, and they delivered that. So they would get better visibility, they would get more access to consumers, consumers would be more likely to drop into their brand outlet within the Alibaba environment, and so therefore the chances of their sales happening would be higher. And they had certain trust issues which they addressed through third party verification of sellers' claims, which in very easy terms is a testimonial. I have bought said brand's product, said product is good, I have used it, here is my photo, here is my video, here is my sale receipt, and so therefore I am vouching that, hey, this is good to buy. Now as a customer, the moment I say this and another customer looks at it, they say somebody, a real person has found it, they've used it, they found it great, good for me to buy as well. These testimonials today are a regular feature. Amazon uses them extensively. All of the smart ones are using the regularization of this entire testimonial feature. So this is third party verification. It is not a vested party, it is not the buyer, not the seller, it is somebody who has used it. So real time usage is getting reflected in this. Also, they created something called an Alipay escrow service. So this is to ensure that funds will not get missed out in the entire transaction. So secure payments happened until the transaction was completed. What if I pay ahead, and what if I don't get the goods that I am looking for? On the other side, what if I provide the goods and don't get paid for it? So the money gets safely parked with Alipay, then Alipay pays me once I have completed my side of the transaction. That's how every party went on happy, and obviously because of the service they got a certain surcharge on this, which was their handling fees. So they were making money on it. So all of these things along with network effects were driving the growth for Alibaba. There was high buyer traffic and attracted more sellers because this marketplace is happening. Let's go there, our goods will sell like hotcakes. Every single seller was making a beeline for Alibaba, and this created a positive feedback loop. Every time I go, I get my product sold, I tell 5 of my friends who also come, they tell 5 of their friends. So it is a harmonic progression really, if you look at the kind of exponential growth in terms of the sellers who were making a beeline for Alibaba. And this outpaced competitors like Tencent and Amazon. They really took out the rug from under their feet. So this is how Alibaba managed to establish and push away bigger competition till they actually grew to a fairly large size compared to the others. Now They also did a lot in terms of enhancing their approach. So they did multi-language support. They had 15 languages, including Hebrew, Vietnamese, whichever markets they found their buyers coming from, to cater to non-English speaking markets. China itself, much like India, they have a vernacular offering which is far superior, at least in their own terms, compared to the English language which comes from outside. We have sort of let it go down, but now it is coming back with a resurge. Understanding how your vernacular roots, how your ethnicity, how the pride of your own nation is important for you to inspire growth is something that has to be understood before it can be marketed to the population. They understood this very, very well. They also understood that other countries, they operated very well without English. The Israelis worked in Hebrew, the Vietnamese had their own language, Cambodians used their own, Filipinos used theirs, and as did other countries, even India for that matter. So Ali's suppliers mobile app was created, and this helped manage buyer inquiries, and they kept updating orders over here. So with the vernacular, they brought people closer, made it feel like home. It was comfortable working in that environment, and with the app, you could get your inputs and updates on the go. Beyond this, there was a trade manager chat. If you are a fairly sized player, this function enabled real-time communication between buyers and sellers. It was like a hotline. So buyer, seller, make the connect, let them have the interaction. And then there was Ali Source Pro, which was a tool that matched buyers with suppliers based on product specs, and that expedited the entire purchasing process. It's like making a marriage. You make a match, and if the match works out, you are the one who gets all the credit for it. Same ways, here buyers were matched with suppliers based on the product specs, whatever they needed. All of these things were suitably answered. So there is a lot of data analysis. There is a lot of interlinking and big data, obviously, because so many different kinds of offerings, so many buyers, so many sellers were all at the same point in time active on the platform. So together, this was a data oriented and a data led entire ecosystem. The kind of growth and impact that they faced because of this: first, they created that user friendly platform design, and they gave easy accessibility and usability, so people were relaxed when they used the environment. And it played a very, very pivotal role in popularizing China Singles Day. Now, the problem with singles in China is a one-child country. At least that had been their policy since Mao Zedong's time. Now, because of which there were a lot of people who were of marriageable age, but were not getting married off because they were pursuing life, career, and various other obligations. Now, this has become the largest shopping event globally, only very recently to be superseded by Black Friday, because now Black Friday has taken over. The Chinese economy has gone into a slight wane. Their other sectors have collapsed, because of which, and obviously Jack Ma being ousted by the government has also. So these are all again VUCA factors. You remember that nothing is permanent. Things can change in a snap, which is precisely why you have to be prepared for eventualities so that the business thrives and survives despite the market forces acting on you. They could be in your favor, but they could also be against you. So you have to be prepared for these things. Now, with this, they continue to expand into a variety of sectors. They got into technology. This Amazon has done better than them, incidentally, which is cloud computing. Amazon offers a variety of other services just other than data warehousing and cloud computing. They provide a variety, a vast array of services which allow you to use the computing power that is provided by the cloud, and a lot of services which help you create content, which help you structure your presence on the internet, which helps you do better transactions, gets you security as well. So a lot more has been done by Amazon in this particular space, but they also, Alibaba also as a group, got into technology. Then they got into gaming and social media because it was huge. China was shielded from the entire world using Sina Weibo and their other format, which was the lookalike of Facebook and Twitter, which was internalized for China, and they had a huge population, because of which that particular population could easily be targeted, and you could get gaming and social media going for that particular audience. And this gave them the ability to invest in entertainment, which was movies, which was gaming, and which was events and engagement as well. And in terms of global e-commerce markets, they started challenging rivals like the biggie Amazon on even a global scale. So these were the aspects which helped Jack Ma and his creation Alibaba as a organization to take the fight to the big ones like Jeff Bezos' Amazon. What they also, as an internal factor of success, they fixed their purpose. We've spoken at length on what purposing does to an organization. It gives you a clear direction to run towards. It shows you the light at the end of the tunnel and you start running towards that particular end goal. So there was a lot of focus on trust and accessibility. Sadly, over the years, this got lost out because once you become too large, you are unable to manage it. There are external factors which gnaw away at your success, like what happened internally within China's construct. But in its heyday, Alibaba managed to actually create a lot of trust and accessibility, and this attracted both the buyers and sellers. What broke them was not just their doing, it was what affected China overall. The image of China fell, which also affected them. They still held out for quite a while, but then there were internal politics and other factors which got into the fray, and that's why they had to break away. And the moment they did, the entire Chinese political machinery got the better of them. Diverse platforms they created, and these were catering to varied market needs and used the various B2B, B2C and C2C formats, so that every type of customer was attended to. And they had a certain resilience and adaptability, because of which they knew what consumer trends were shifting, when, who, where was asking for what. And so therefore, they made the necessary technological innovations to address those particular questions, address the particular product needs, etc. And the network effects that gave it the strength in its marketplace dominance against big rivals like Amazon. That brings us to another internet-based behemoth, but this is more of a service, and this works for organizations by entrenching its service platform into the daily utility of the outward-looking aspects of marketing for any particular business organization. This is Salesforce. Salesforce was founded in, again, 99 by Mark Benioff. He was formerly of Oracle. He had a certain vision that, if everybody just contributes 1% of what they do or what they make into profit, as a not-for-profit organization which takes care of various needs which they feel as a group should prosper and should make the world a better place, it should happen. That was the core of what started Salesforce. But their success was because of their alacrity, because of their careful consideration of things and their intent to make the world a better place. The end objective drove the spirit, drove the purposing and drove the vision and the gusto with which the entire organization worked. So Salesforce.com, it specializes in cloud-based customer relationship management or CRM. Now, this is the end of software as far as they view it, because they are saying we are the service, you don't need any software. We are going to end the need for any software, and this was positioned as a simpler web-based alternative to complex software systems. You don't need anything, all you need is the internet. We will provide the rest. So by 2003, they had already become the largest CRM software provider worldwide. So this was a huge growth for something which was very recently started. So if you see, just in 4 years, they had managed to disrupt the market because they had that process thought through and they knew exactly what to do with the CRM industry at large. Now, the traditional CRM format before the coming on the scene by Salesforce was that there were high costs because you had to buy software. So either you bought software, then you had to buy licenses. So for 200 users, it would cost you about 3.5 lakhs or $350,000. And with total expenses exceeding about 1.8 million per year. So there would be hardware costs, IT costs, training costs, maintenance costs, and all these costs would actually bear down on the organization, and therefore it would also be passed on in terms of the value which they gleaned from their end customer. So the customer was paying top dollar for the needs of the organization. So they were paying an inflated cost, and that inflated cost also meant long deployment time, because you have to ensure that your software is spread across the entire systems scenario of the organization. It would take time like 18 to 24 months. So a year and a half to maybe even 2 years to implement it across all nodes. And this would cause delays in achieving the optimum functionality, and unfortunately, by the time something takes a year and a half or 2 years to get implemented, it starts becoming obsolete. Newer challenges come up. So then how are you going to plan for something 2 years in the future? It is too much to expect of a rigid format like a software. But the moment you have something which is web based, you make one change, and the entire system, which just needs internet to be accessed, changes for everybody. So the one game changer which happened in this place was the arrival of high speed internet, and through which the access to Salesforce was given. The earlier systems had a lot of complexity and high failure rates because they were one piece of software, but they were not malleable, they were not changeable to the needs of specific organizations and their particular customer sets. So the systems were difficult to integrate with existing infrastructure because people had older systems, newer systems, different kinds of systems, and 60% of implementations failed, but still the industry was running because there was no other way around it, because you had to bring in a central repository for all the inputs from your customers. You had to ensure that you mined that data, you had to ensure that you responded in time. So the need was there, the fulfillment was not happening properly, and that was where the gap was. Now this lack of flexibility was also because customers had limited opportunities to try the software or customize it like we spoke of, and they had to just go ahead in blind faith purchase it, and then they will falter, fall and be all groping in the dark. So this was the scenario before Salesforce actually came onto the scene. So let's now understand what Salesforce did as a revolutionary solution to answer all these traditional CRM challenges. They introduced something called an on-demand CRM, something you just switch on and it just arrives. So you don't have to wait for that particular gestation period. It is entirely based on cloud computing. Internet is the big gateway through which you get this particular service by a browser format. So applications whichever are required are stored and they are all delivered online. So there is a concept called a fat server, which basically means the server is doing all the heavy lifting, and you've got a thin client, which means all you need is a browser to interact with the server. So this was the format which they went in for. This is a typical IT and ITES piece of information which you need to understand, and through this they delivered their entire CRM experience. Now, like we said, the browser became the conduit through which they would not need to install any software, but still be able to access the heavy duty CRM backend that Salesforce was providing. So affordability increased sharply, and the cost came down to something like $65 per user per month. And for example, 200 users earlier would have cost you 3.5 lakhs in terms of dollars. Now it was costing about $1.5 lakh, $156,000 per year to be precise. The ease of use again was that you had immediate access. There was no required IT setup, a machine, a browser, internet connectivity, you're on. There was flexibility also. The monthly subscription plans allowed customers to cancel anytime if unsatisfied. So it is switch off, switch on. And then customizability. You could actually add components to your particular preferences, to the need of your pipeline, to the expectations of your users and the end consumer you are interacting with. And this enabled the customers to test, adapt services, and this always met their needs. What also enhanced Salesforce product and service capabilities was their features and the user-friendly design. So they focused on core CRM needs first and foremost. They got the basics right. They gave you sales automations, which means your entire sales process was streamlined. Everything was happening one after the other in sequence. They knew exactly what were the triggers, what would change in the next step, and what consideration the next person in line had to take into mind when they were addressing the same ongoing customer. Again, there was marketing automation. So, they didn't have to depend on a human intervention to continuously keep talking to customers. There would be optimized campaigns, predefined content which would go out at different benchmarked times, and these would keep interacting and nurturing the entire sales conversation. And there was constant customer support which enhanced the service capabilities, and this was because of simplified design. The design made it very, very simple and removed excess features. There was not a lot of extra features crammed in which was of no utility for that particular organization. They gave them a clean and a very intuitive interface. So, it was very normal, it was very natural for the user, the salesperson, to be able to understand what was going on in the interface and utilize it for the best output possible. Regular updates were given, and this was based on the user feedback, and this improved whatever usability was there. And there were times when they were relocating frequently, and so they used functions which actually managed that particular scenario. People on sales beats tend to go from place to place. Each time they are connected to the internet, they may need certain specifics for that particular geography. So, that geographical consideration would also be brought in and built in into the entire function. This also enabled businesses to create tailored environments. Each organization's needs were kept into mind, and you gave the answers specific to their requirements. And tools like force.com came into play, which was a platform for developers. Now, they also got developers, the IT side, the enablement side involved, and they started designing custom CRM applications which you could pick off the shelf and incorporate as per your need and requirement. Moving further, they launched certain key competitive advantages, certain differentiators, certain disruptors which gave them an edge in the market. They launched Salesforce Customer 360. This was AI powered, which was the new way to look at data points, look at customer trends, look at interactions, and probably even foretell or predict what was going to happen in that particular interaction. And this united marketing, sales, commerce, IT and analytics. So, everything together in one particular central powerhouse server was all being manipulated from a location, and AI was enabling the heavy lifting of the decision making process. You would get clear, sharp insights to act upon. Here again, single shared customer views were provided, and this improved the collaborations against all these departments which were working in the organization and teams which would actually handle these particular tasks. There was something they launched called Chatter, which was a social networking app which was private. So, you had certain times you had to quickly share notes, you had to rant, you had to banter. This facilitated real time communication amongst the employees. So, it was contained within the organization, it was not exposed to the world outside, but still gave them a normal environment for socializing, which helped people collaborate and thrive together as teams. And force.com, which we spoke of before, this allowed businesses to host their own apps. So, they could use Salesforce's platform, Salesforce's servers, and on top of that they built their own apps using it as a white labeled base. This provided tools for unique CRM solutions, and these were tailored to the specific organizational needs, whatever their particular requirements were. And it is constantly evolving by leveraging AI, learnings keep coming in, insights keep getting drilled out, and so therefore, you have got advanced analytics, you are able to trend better, you are able to forecast better, and everything gets automated. You put in triggers basis certain events that you are expecting, certain exceptions that you may have to handle, and each of these process parts get managed better. So, this entire particular process gave them that particular angle to improve on the current CRM which was available. And this also started addressing market needs. How? They targeted small and medium sized businesses which were struggling with resource constraints, because you have seen the kind of numbers involved in the investment that would be required to have a CRM going on. So, they would get limited seats, but that cost would also come down. Otherwise, if you had to implement it across the entire organization, the costs would be tremendous for any small and medium enterprise, and they would not be able to bear it. But now, with the advent of online seat-based architecture, they could actually get into getting limited teams access to Salesforce's capabilities and thereby utilize the strength that came from the central servers and the capability of AI-based thinking and the capability of the machine-led thinking capabilities that Salesforce started providing. This gave them affordable, scalable solutions, and this appealed to growing businesses. And as they improved their own processes, they used Salesforce's offerings to expand and become better and better. Also, it attracted large corporations because robust features were built in. There's lots of flexibility. You could change the size of the teams working on certain parts of the project. You could add interoperability between departments. A lot was going in favor of the particular large corporations as well. So everybody started to make a beeline for Salesforce. This helped Salesforce become the go-to solution because they were offering cost effectiveness, which is primary. The second thing was the deployment was in a snap. It was so simplified. And the third part was their entire user experience was simplified. It was customer driven. It was feedback oriented. It was customizable, tailor made. So it became so robust that it almost became something which nobody could actually go away from. You could not shut out a Salesforce's offering for business. And this helped them create sustained growth, and they became market leaders because they were always at their core, they were innovating. So they continuously expanded their offerings and they stayed ahead in the CRM market. And low cost, high value proposition was a constant. So therefore, they maintained their competitive pricing while giving better and better features. So each time a new feature would come out, the price would marginally shift, but given the amount of overall capabilities that Salesforce brought to the table, the incremental price change was nothing at all. And they had a huge kind of customer base, small to large, varied businesses, varied requirements. So from SMBs to Fortune 500, everybody started using Salesforce's offerings in terms of CRM. And so therefore, they gained something very, very critical: market trust. They stamped upon their capability when it came to CRM, and everybody knew if you had to think CRM, Salesforce were the go-to people for that. And they also were innovators in their category. They had a cloud-first strategy. When other people were implementing across organizations, they implemented it on a cloud server farm, and from there, they through internet provided it to everybody. And this revolutionized the CRM aspect and gave cloud computing and AI a certain incisive role in the entire interoperability of marketing and other departmental aspects in any organization. This ensured the scalability and adaptability. You could easily increase, decrease, switch off, switch on, add. So it was literally plug and play. It was that simple to implement and that easy and flexible to get out there in the market. And that is why Salesforce, in their entire exercise, they managed to transform the entire CRM as a business, and they addressed core challenges of traditional software, which were cost, huge cost, complexity of getting it to marry with the customer's needs, implementation, and obviously the time involved, because it would take a year and a half to 2 years. So that was huge amount of opportunity loss for the buyer organization. Again, what they did was they included flexible cloud-based solutions. So number of seats would change, number of capabilities would change, the kind of apps you would be able to bring in off the shelf or even develop your own. All of these factors started to work in the favor of Salesforce, and this made the entire CRM aspect accessible for businesses of any size, like we've discussed. So we've got the small ones and you've got Fortune 500. Any scale of business was easily able to pick from the offerings and adapt it to their personal needs, which was how tailoring was happening. And at the end of it, everything was backed by AI. And this helped them maintain their dominance through consistent innovation. They were constantly evolving the product, they were thinking, they were interacting, they were taking feedback from the customers. And it's not necessary that your organization's feedback is only going to affect you. It can affect the entire industry, a variety of other sectors, verticals from other industry formats, and they can also benefit from what you are going to offer. So therefore, that feedback loop was something which they shared the intelligence and applicability across all the sectors and verticals. And yes, obviously you had the choice. So it was all plug and play. Whichever little item you needed, just plugged it in and just switched it on. It was that simple. And this, with the products like Customer 360, Chatter, Force.com, all of which we have discussed, they helped integrate it very, very strongly with the end customers. And obviously it helped them get a fairer picture of what the consumer was up to, how to nurture them, how to ensure that their entire journey was mapped, and at times automated responses would go out and help them nurture. So each time human intervention was not banked upon. The CRM software was robust enough, and because it was connected to the internet and so was the consumer, so the linkage was so strong that you could instantly send messages at a designated time with a certain specific content that would keep the conversation going with the customer till the closure point came about. And this is how they also continue to redefine CRM even today. And they are building tools that foster collaboration between departments, between customer and consumer, between other suppliers, and they build in efficiency and superior customer experiences as they go along. And do remember, their purpose, which everything stemmed from, is to give back to society. That 1% which they donate from all of their profits is something which goes back into building society. So each person who works at Salesforce feels that they are an empowered contributor to that singular purpose which Salesforce stands for. So it is a very, very strong and very, very sharp way of getting people to tribe. So it's internal selling and internal tribing of employees together as a band for Salesforce's growth and upward movement as well. So as an end point, let's just recap all we have seen today. The success stories of both what we've seen, Alibaba and Salesforce, they exemplify how necessarily innovation, we've always seen how they have actually listened to consumer inputs, they've listened to their business customers' requirements, and with those customer centric strategies they have progressed, and that is why they have been able to disrupt traditional markets. Things which were done, everybody said this is the only way to do it, but no, we will create new paradigms. We will re-inspect the way the business is being done and try and do it in a better, faster, more efficient way. This is how Alibaba and Salesforce both got the success that they very rightly deserved. Alibaba managed to harness the power of digital connectivity, and it revolutionized global commerce, and it empowered, very importantly, small businesses. And it established itself as a leader in e-commerce through adaptability and scale. Salesforce defined the CRM process all over again, and they introduced cloud-based on-demand solutions, switch off, switch on, and they made advanced technology accessible, affordable, very importantly affordable, because the small businesses which could not afford CRM before now got an access to CRM capabilities, and they ensured that it was user friendly for businesses of all sizes. This is something which marketers must keep in mind. See, benevolence, the one key word we have caught upon and I have stressed enough on is the kindness. The kindness which is inside the marketer allows them to walk a mile or two in the shoes of their customer, to think what impact their decisions are going to have in the lives of their intended customers. And if they're able to make that connect, if they're able to have that empathy, if they're able to live the day of their customer once also, they will understand what pains they go through. And with that comes insight. With that comes the ability to create solutions which are truly going to solve customer problems. And both cases highlight the importance of identifying market inefficiencies. They leverage technology very critically because we live in that age. They address customer needs. They foster trust. Trust is important. Even if it is organization to organization, we are all human. It's a human to human interaction. So trust works at a very, very individual level, and that drives value. Value driven services is what we create, we proffer, and these principles underline the potential of visionary leadership. You have to have purpose at the core, mission set out goals defined, and that will create the journey for your organizational success. And this you have to continuously build morale and relentlessly focus so that you march your entire organizational troops in that one single direction, all chariots pulling in one particular way. And this solves real world problems. You can actually grow larger than just solving organizational problems. You can solve world problems at one fell swoop. And this will help you achieve enduring business success. It's not just success which happens in 5 years, 10 years. It is success that lasts. It's success that people write about. It's success that people teach about. So with all of that, we come to an end of today's conversation. And moving further, we will look at other very critical aspects like corporate trustworthiness, again through a case study, and we will actually go through the process of how a tender played out in a real life scenario, and that will give you an insight as to how brands really operate in a B2B environment. That's coming up, but thank you for being such a patient and wonderful audience today. Let's move further together.
Hello, good morning everybody. I am Raghunandan Sengupta. So, I will just give you a very brief excitement area of finance, which is quantitative finance, and that has a huge market starting around about 10 years back, and it is exploding exponentially. So, what do we mean by quantitative finance? Quantitative finance is actually the application of different mathematical and statistical techniques in the area of financial markets, be it say for example derivative pricing, be it in the area of say for example portfolio management, be it in the area of asset liability management, be it in the area of portfolio management. We see that the application has exploded in such a way that there is a huge opportunity for people who have a quantitative background in mathematics and statistics. They can utilize those in the area of finance, but obviously with some prior knowledge of finance as a subject. Now, when we say about quantitative finance, as I said, it is an area of applied mathematics and statistics applied in financial markets. Use of different areas, if somebody is interested to know, we have stochastic calculus, we have derivative pricing, we have operation research, we have quantitative techniques like differential equations, stochastic calculus, time series, and they are heavily used in the area of quantitative finance as I mentioned. Now, we all know that in 1997 the Nobel Prize in Economics, so it is basically the Nobel Memorial Prize in Economics was given to the work of Merton and Scholz in the area of derivative pricing, and after that there has been exponential increase in the area of quantitative techniques in quantitative finance and in the area of different type of derivative pricing. With the advent, moreover with the advent of high-ended and sophisticated computing data, big data has come in a very big way, where application areas starting from computing, from different type of algorithm design have been taken up in such a big way that nowadays at least we are able to understand that how high frequency data algorithm trading can be utilized using the concept of quantitative finance in the area of finance as such. But there is a flip side also, obviously when there is a huge amount of development, so obviously due to some regulation errors or something, there has been some pitfalls, which I think should be a bullet point for people who are really interested to take up quantitative finance. They should be aware. So, consider the financial crisis in 2008 and later on, and we are seeing different banks are failing, different financial institutions are facing a problem, countries are facing a problem like in Europe, in USA. So, what should be done? So, the main thing is that even if you know the technique, is best for people who are investors, who are private players, organizations like banks, governments should use these techniques in a very somber manner, such that the application areas of quantitative finance using the techniques which we learned can be utilized in the best possible way to garner the overall the in-depth knowledge a person has in trying to utilize these quantitative techniques in finance. And I am sure that people who have the background, who have the knowledge, who have the sophistication, who have the knowledge of the society can definitely use quantitative finance in a very big way in trying to make their mark in this exciting field, which you are going to see in years to come. And I am sure it will be a very exciting learning tool for all the participants who will take quantitative finance as a subject in years to come. Thank you, and I wish all the participants all the best and best of luck for the programs they will take. Thank you.